Hi, I'm Dr. Lenne Hunt with the Marriage Recovery Center, and today we're talking about one of the issues which are core to emotional abuse. If you've done much reading, much listening to videos, then I'm sure you're familiar with the term gaslighting. Gaslighting refers to a general idea that one party in the relationship is attempting to distort the other person's sense of reality. Gaslighting is actually accomplished through a set of other tactics. Each of these, in the end, help create this reality distortion. For example, outright denial. So one person says to another, when you said this, when you did that thing, it had this effect on me. I felt hurt, I felt embarrassed, I felt whatever. And the abuser's response is, I never said that. That didn't happen. You're remembering that wrong. Another tactic would be blame shifting, where there's not denial that the event occurred, but rather the abuser's portrayal is that it occurred because of something the victimized person did. So yes, I did this, but it was because you caused it in some way, shape, or form. Another form that gaslighting can take is the delivery of what looks on the surface like a joke, but really is an insult. It's just been dressed up a little bit to look like a joke. So it creates this perception that this instance of humor has occurred when the intent is actually very different and the effect is very different. A couple of other versions or tactics involved in gaslighting. Saying to the wounded party that what they feel or what they want isn't true. Here's just a really mild example of that. Let's say I say to my spouse, gosh, it feels really cold in here. And their response is, you can't feel cold. The temperature's set to 70. Well, you may not feel cold, but I do, right? So it's attempting to say that what you feel isn't valid, it isn't true, it isn't real. That can also be applied not just to what I feel, but also to what I want. I want to go vacation in the mountains. You know you don't really want to do that. You'd rather go to the beach. And here's all the reasons why you'd rather go to the beach. But that's not really what I want. Right? So there are all of these tactics, each of them a bit different, but the result of them is to create this shift, this distortion in reality. Now, the core issue I want to talk about here related to this subject, this broad subject of gaslighting, is what's at the heart of it, what maintains the gaslighting. This is where we need to talk about a disability, a disorder in the realm of responsibility taking. So essentially what we're talking about in a gaslighting scenario, no matter which of these tactics have been enacted, is that we've got an abusive person who is putting all of the responsibility for the relationship and for the bad behavior on the victim. So whether that happens through the blame shifting, through the outright denial, it doesn't matter. The end result is the same, that one person has denied responsibility and has placed the responsibility on the other. Now, I want to go back into the tactics I mentioned earlier and look more specifically at how that happens. So when one person says, I never said that, or that just didn't happen at all, even if it's just in insinuation, if that's the only statement given, I never said that. The insinuation is that the other person remembers it wrong, that there's something faulty in how they recount events. There's an implied responsibility then on the victim. You're just not thinking straight about it. You're just not remembering it right. The problem is you. The problem is not that I actually did or said something. So do you see the shift of responsibility there? Maybe it's the insult that's been thinly disguised as a joke. And the wounded party says something like, that really hurt my feelings when you said that. And you might find the abusive party saying something like, what's wrong with you? Can't you take a joke? Totally denying the underlying dig, the underlying cut, the underlying insult that's been delivered. And once again, shifting the responsibility for it onto the person who's been victimized by it. Similarly, in saying that you don't feel what you feel, that you don't want what you want, the implication in that is that you don't know what's best for yourself. You don't even know your own mind. You, again, a false read on the environment, that there's something about you that's not getting that right. Shifting of responsibility. One of the one that I think is often difficult for people is a tactic that involves creating confusion in a conversation. So you'll be trying to talk through an issue, maybe reach some resolution of a problem, and it begins to feel like that the conversation spins in circles. You think you've reached some agreement, and then the abusive party brings it back up again as though it wasn't settled. Or they go off on these wild bunny trails, these things that create real difficulty in following them in conversation. And so the result that often has is that the abusive party knows exactly what's going on in the conversation because they're the one creating the confusion. They're the one deflecting. They're the one going off on these wild tangents. The other person feels confused. And in the conversation, often then is portrayed as being illogical or being someone who isn't able to think clearly, isn't able to process clearly, as though the confusion was their fault rather than the result of the tactics that the other party's engaging in. In all of these ways, you see the shift happen from the person who's perpetrating the tactic onto the person who unfortunately is the recipient of it. And no amount of confrontation, no amount of saying to the abusive person, you actually said that, you actually did that. You're the one confusing the conversation. No, this is what I feel. And any attempt to push back against the distortion is met with denial of responsibility. So as you might imagine, the treatment of the disordered person can be involved and lengthy. We're not talking about a quick fix here. The good news is that this is treatable. It is treatable for the abusive one. It is treatable for the victimized one. But it doesn't go away on its own. And it would be rare for the abusive party to just sort of suddenly out of nowhere or in reaction to something the victim has said, just kind of see the light on their own. It tends to take more intervention than that. And so along those lines, the other thing I want to say to you is that if this describes your life right now, if it describes your relationship, whether you are the injured party or the offending party, we would love to help. We would love to come alongside you and help you figure this out. I promise you that it can be different if you want it to be. At the very least, if you are the injured party, even if the other person never comes into responsibility taking, there is still healing for your soul. And again, we would be glad to walk with you through that. So you're going to see a number appear below here on the screen. That's the number to our client care team, a great group of people who would be happy to hear some of your story and help you schedule whatever would be the next best step for you in coming through this. We hope to hear from you soon.